The I-team's been tracking for months.
Over the weekend, more than 100 people were busted in Wisconsin.
FBI's new squad unit dedicated to this problem. Investigators can't explain why Southeast Wisconsin is so active in the child sex trafficking business.
Wisconsin just became the latest battlefield in America's war against child traffickers. 24 arrests, multiple rescued victims, and a transnational criminal network completely dismantled. These criminals thought they could exploit children in Wisconsin without consequence. They thought wrong. Here's how ICE and federal partners just proved that American children are protected no matter where predators try to hide. Before we continue, be sure to hit the subscribe button, as that fuels all the efforts behind these videos. For decades, Americans have been told that human trafficking is a distant problem, something that happens in major coastal cities or foreign countries. But on September 25, 2025, federal agents shattered that illusion when they conducted a sweeping operation in Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, arresting 24 individuals with ties to a transnational human trafficking and drug trafficking ring. This wasn't just another immigration enforcement action. It was the culmination of an intelligence-driven investigation sparked by the courage of trafficking victims, many of them children, who found the strength to speak out about their exploitation. Their testimonies led to one of the most coordinated federal responses ever seen in America's heartland, bringing together 6 federal agencies in a synchronized strike against predators who thought they were beyond the reach of justice. The arrests send a clear message to trafficking networks worldwide. There is no safe haven for those who exploit children, not even in the quiet communities of rural Wisconsin. No matter how far from the border, no matter how seemingly insulated from criminal networks, every American town is now under the protective shield of federal agencies determined to eliminate the threat of child trafficking. Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, with its picturesque lakeside views and tight-knit farming communities, seems an unlikely setting for a transnational criminal network. With a population of just over 80,000 spread across small towns and rural areas, it represents the quintessential American heartland, hard-working, family-focused, and traditionally safe from the problems plaguing major urban centers. Yet it was precisely these qualities that made it attractive to traffickers. In communities where trust runs high and suspicion runs low, criminal organizations found opportunity. They exploited the inherent openness of rural America, counting on the fact that residents wouldn't expect or look for sophisticated trafficking operations in their midst. The investigation revealed that this wasn't a case of local criminals operating in isolation. This was a sophisticated network with international connections, particularly to Central America. Several of those arrested had previously been deported, including Jose Hilario Moreno Portillo from Honduras, who had been removed from the United States in August 2020, only to return and be arrested for sexual assault of a child in May 2025. Others in the network included Abraham Maldonado Almanza from Mexico, convicted of identity theft, and Raul Francisco Monroy Orellana from Honduras, convicted of hit and run and multiple traffic offenses. The trafficking network established itself by exploiting legitimate economic needs in the community. Manitowoc County is home to more than 100,000 dairy cattle, with farms ranging from small family operations to large commercial enterprises with thousands of animals. The dairy industry's constant need for labor created opportunities for traffickers to place victims in seemingly legitimate work while controlling their movements, earnings, and lives. What makes this case particularly disturbing is how the traffickers embedded themselves into the fabric of the community. They didn't operate from shadowy warehouses or abandoned buildings, but within the everyday life of rural Wisconsin. Some worked on dairy farms, others in small businesses, all while building a criminal infrastructure that trafficked both humans and drugs. They didn't just bring victims to Wisconsin. They created a pipeline that could move people and drugs throughout the Midwest, using the region's extensive highway system and relative seemingly protected by its values and traditions, can be targeted by sophisticated criminal enterprises that see vulnerability rather than virtue in America's heartland. The breakthrough in the case came not from sophisticated surveillance or deep cover operatives, but from the courage of the victims themselves, many of them children who found the strength to speak about their exploitation. During FBI interviews, these young survivors provided crucial intelligence that revealed the scope and structure of the trafficking network operating in Manitowoc County. For many of these children, coming forward meant overcoming not just fear of their traffickers, but cultural and language barriers, unfamiliarity with American law enforcement, and the trauma of their exploitation. Yet they spoke, and in doing so, they became not just victims, but heroes in the fight against trafficking in America's heartland. The testimonies revealed patterns of exploitation that had been carefully hidden from the community. Children brought to Wisconsin under false promises of education or legitimate work found themselves trapped in situations of sexual exploitation or forced labor. Their movements were restricted, their communications monitored, and their earnings confiscated by handlers who maintained control through threats of violence or deportation. What made these interviews particularly valuable was the detailed information they provided about the network's structure. Victims could identify not just their immediate handlers, but connections to higher-level operators, safe houses, transportation methods, and communication systems. This intelligence allowed federal investigators to map the entire criminal enterprise rather than just identifying isolated criminal acts. FBI victim specialists played a crucial role in this process, creating safe environments where traumatized children could speak without fear of judgment or retribution. These specialists, trained in trauma-informed interviewing techniques, knew how to gather crucial intelligence without re-traumatizing survivors who had already endured unimaginable abuse. The interviews also revealed the intersection between human trafficking and drug trafficking operations. In some cases, victims were forced to participate in an operation wasn't limited to Manitowoc County. Victims described being moved between locations across multiple states, indicating that what appeared to be a local problem was actually part of a much larger criminal enterprise with regional or even national reach. The courage of these young witnesses not only provided the evidence needed for federal action, but demonstrated the central truth of anti-trafficking work, that victims, when supported and believed, become the most powerful weapon against the networks that exploited them. Their testimony transformed them from objects of exploitation to agents of justice, their voices becoming the catalyst for one of the most significant federal operations in Wisconsin's recent history. The scale of the federal response to the Manitowoc County trafficking network was unprecedented for rural Wisconsin. 6 federal agencies coordinated in the September 25th operation: Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, the U.S. Marshal Service, USMS, the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, and the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. This wasn't just a show of force, it was a demonstration of how seriously federal authorities took the threat identified through victim testimonies. Each agency brought operate in America, not just in expected locations, but wherever vulnerability and opportunity coincide. The results were immediate and significant. 24 arrests, the seizure of evidence linking the operation to international criminal organizations, and the disruption of both human and drug trafficking networks that had operated undetected for years. But perhaps more important than these tangible outcomes was the message sent to trafficking networks nationwide. There is no community too small, no location too remote to escape federal attention when children are being exploited. As the dust settled on the September 25th operation, the full impact of what had been accomplished became clear. 24 individuals with ties to a transnational human trafficking and drug trafficking ring were in custody, facing charges that ranged from immigration violations to sexual assault of a child. But more important than the arrests was what they represented: justice for victims who had suffered in silence, and security for a community that had been unwittingly harboring predators. Among those arrested was Jose Hilario Moreno Portillo, a Honduran national who had previously been deported in August 2020, only to return illegally and be arrested for sexual assault of a child in May 2025. His case exemplifies how trafficking networks often involve individuals with histories of sexual violence against minors, not opportunistic criminals, but predators who deliberately seek access to vulnerable children. Another arrestee, Abraham Maldonado Almanza from Mexico, had been convicted of identity theft, a crime that in the context of trafficking operations often facilitates the creation of false documentation for victims. Roel Francisco Monroy Orellana from Honduras had convictions for hit and run and multiple traffic offenses, highlighting the diverse criminal activities that often accompany human trafficking operations. The arrests weren't just about removing dangerous individuals from the community. They were about dismantling a criminal infrastructure. Each person taken into custody represented a link in a chain that had enabled the exploitation of vulnerable individuals, particularly children. By removing these links, federal authorities struck at the operational capacity of the entire network. For the victims, the arrests represented more than justice. They marked the beginning of recovery.
On your side recently showed you an undercover operation that rescued children from human traffickers. The operation set a U.S. record by pulling 60 children from dangerous situations and at the same time arresting 8 people accused of putting children in terrible situations. Tonight, we take you to the next step of the recovery for these children. News Channel 8's Jeff Patterson joins us. He is live in Tampa with that. Jeff.
Taking children out of these terrible situations where some have been sold for sex is an awesome result of this 2-week operation, but it's not the end of the story for many of these children. Some have also been abused, some have become addicted to drugs, and all need help.
Our cameras were there as a task force led by the U.S. Marshal Service removed children from dangerous situations. Over a 2-week period in Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco counties, 60 children were recovered, sometimes taken from nondescript motels like this one in Pinellas Park. But for the children recovered, this isn't the end of the story. In some ways, it's only the start.
We actually have kids that live here full time.
Deborah Charles is a supervisor with Children's Home Network. She put in time in the hub, the first step for children removed from dangerous places by the U.S. Marshal Task Force. Some of the children are then brought here. We can't show you the faces of the children recovered, but many will meet someone like Stephanie Turner.
I came from a background of human trafficking, so I was trafficked for about 13 years.
She knows from personal experience what the children rescued by this operation will now face.
I don't have to constantly worry about when they're going to eat, who's coming in to see them, So safety has come to them now, and then just their healing journey, really. And it's going to be quite a long journey for these kiddos.
Federal victim services were immediately deployed to provide support, connecting survivors with medical care, counseling, safe housing, and legal advocacy. For child victims, specialized services addressed both their immediate trauma and their long-term needs for stability and healing. The community impact extended beyond those directly affected by trafficking. The operation served as a wake-up call for Manitowoc County and similar communities across the American heartland. Federal authorities have made it clear that this operation isn't an endpoint, but a beginning. The intelligence gathered during the arrests is already being used to identify related trafficking networks in other locations. For the children whose courage made this operation possible, the arrests represent validation of their experiences and their worth. They spoke, they were believed, and the full power of federal law enforcement responded to their call for help. In doing so, they not only secured justice for themselves, but protection for countless other potential victims who will now never experience the trauma of trafficking because this network has been dismantled. Officials are calling this operation a turning point in protecting American children, proving that federal agencies will coordinate across all levels to eliminate trafficking networks. The successful coordination of 6 federal agencies demonstrates that when it comes to protecting children, jurisdictional boundaries and agency rivalries take a back seat to the shared mission of bringing traffickers to justice. The Wisconsin operation establishes a new model for addressing trafficking in rural America, one that recognizes the unique vulnerabilities of these communities while bringing to bear the full resources of federal law enforcement. It acknowledges that while trafficking may look different in Manitowoc County than it does in major cities, it deserves the same comprehensive response. Perhaps most importantly, it sends a message of hope to victims still trapped in trafficking situations across the country. You are not forgotten. Your exploitation is not invisible, and when you find the courage to speak, the most powerful law enforcement agencies in the nation stand ready to act on your behalf. Do you support ICE and the FBI's Wisconsin Child Protection Operation? Should more federal resources focus on trafficking in small-town America? Share your thoughts in the comments.